Hi. I have the honor to route you through the meeting and especially the introduction. I'm talking a little bit more slow because I'm just waiting for a few more participants. I've seen on my list now from round about 40 expected. We are now by 35. I think we can give it a minute or two just to let the last ones coming in. And then we'll start. Somebody coming. It's rising. So close to 40 now and 2 minutes after 2. So I think we should start now. So to me again, Stefan Blei, I'm the CEO of the Network Smart Production, and we are hosting webinars for our members, for our network members on a regular basis. What we have here today is the third one. The first two ones have been more based on security topics. The last one was a network security technology seminar for production networks. And today we have our network partner VCX with Andrew Van Scooter with their topic roundabout homologation of cars. And to start and to introduce you and the whole audience into what the network smart production is doing on a nutshell, I've prepared some slides, but in advance we will have a short view on the agenda, just to have an impression what will go on for the next 2 hours. Short introduction by my side, hopefully within 10 minutes done. Then introduction to the EReg and the EUCARIS, overview on the eCoC and the type approval information exchange model. We will have a short Q&A panel after each session as well here. Then we will have a look at a best practice implemented by VCX, and who will and his colleagues will talk about that. And meet the experts at the end. That means all people having talked here will be here up to the end, and will show a little bit and will be for you for questions. But before starting now, a little bit more on the content, Edward will say a little bit about the technique and the webinar, especially what you see here, to mention that it is be recorded. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Yeah, welcome everyone to our webinar. Just want to give you some tooling information. So we will, as Stefan said, we will have some Q&A panels where you will be allowed to ask questions also to the group. We will open the Q&A session between each of the introduction and the presentations. And what you see in your UI, you will have a little type your message area at the bottom. And when we have opened the Q&A session, you'll have a bubble with a question mark in it. And that's where you can click on it and submit questions you want to have answered by this group. In general, please use the messaging only if you have any issues technically. If we need to speak up louder or anything, please raise your voice by writing a message during the session. It should be used for that. We will have in between some polling, some surveys. I'm not sure if you have used that functionality yet, but it basically it is to get some more idea of where are your challenges and where are you with the whole process. So we would actually invite you to participate in those surveys. Anyway, so that's just from the tooling itself. As the agenda states, we will record the whole session. So this will be at the end, latest by the end of this week, will be provided to you as you have been registered. So that's all from my side. Stefan, I would hand back over to you. Good luck.
Great, thanks, Andrew. But I think you did it well. Yeah, I will speed up. Network Smart Production, just to introduce who we are and what we are doing. We are founded by the city of Mannheim with the idea to bring together industry, and this means production industry, service provider, startup solution provider, and research areas. And this is one of our main focus topics, especially the research access to research people is a great thing that we can provide and do provide in all areas you can imagine. Bringing together the people in a network, doing exchanges, doing meetings, doing fairs, and all these things around that. This is one of our core things we do. To bring a little bit more color in it, I have a slide with me with our teams we have within the network, just to show you around about 50 members we are today. We started with 15, I think, around about that. And we have 3 main streams we do. That is a demonstrator team, a product team, and a business model team. You can imagine if you take care about smart production, that means digital solutions within the production area or close to the production area, you need to show some production. And that was the first thing we did. We built up a small demonstrator to show possibilities, how easy it is, for example, to implement things like a pick by light store or worker assistant systems or things like that. And of course, if you have a production, you have to think about what to produce. This means we founded a team around about the product. And the idea was to have an electronic product measuring environmental data, sending it out and presenting it in the internet to make everything possible with the data, analytics, whatever you can imagine. This is the second one. And you can imagine as well, round about this, a product measuring things and sending it and making it available via internet services. There was a lot of business possible around that. And again, around about these things, a team is working on ideas, what's possible there. Besides that, without bigger portions here, a team taking care about cybersecurity. I just mentioned it in the beginning. We had a cybersecurity webinar a few weeks ago around about production security is working, and the team around about all the topics of smart building is working in the network. Just to give you a little overview on the topics we are working on. On the next slide, we see something what we are doing live now. We are preparing and hosting events round about our production area topics or digital topics within industry things. Let me phrase it more like that. Production is a little bit too small. First of all, the demonstrator I just told about, a physical demonstrator where we can show things. And what we have on the left side, web sessions. This is where we are in now, building the frame, being the host, about topics of our members. And the most famous thing is our network forum. We hosted the 14th. We are just in preparation of the 15th. Always round about the production industry closed topics. And the last one was about green production. Very interesting thing. You see here a presentation of a digital twin with a headline. Without a digital twin, you will have problems to be really green and to be really innovative in a green area, because you have to have all the data about your product to follow it up round about the life cycle. That was one of the core topics. Okay, next one is just a short overview of the events. You see here, for example, in the middle up, the digital production for networks. That was the last one. We have a huge fair about supply chain, which is also managed by a member of our network. We have the security conference. This is, I mentioned, always in end of October. Last year it was 21st to 22nd, our network event, and so on and so on. We are at the Hannover Fair, most of you may know, and several else. So this is the main visible events we prepare, we host, or we are just participate and then talk about it. To have a little view about the insights, who's in there. You can see here some logos, the typical logo slide you always have to see at the advertising part. Please don't hesitate to visit us on our website www.smartproduction.de. There are always a lot of information available about what we are currently doing, which events are coming up, like this one or others. We visit factories, for example. If you are around about the area of south of Germany, maybe you can tell at 18th of January we will visit Bosch Rexroth with our network members, and maybe you are interested in and visit us as well. Last but not least, that's me, CEO of the network. My office is here at the Rathaus in Mannheim, because the city of Mannheim is one of the hosts of the network and support us and supports the network with this office. And I have a colleague, Sandra Link. I'm sharing my job with her so that we can both host and manage the network. Yeah, and that's all for the introduction, just to show you where you are, what the area here roundabout is, and why we are in this web session. And I would hand over now to Itzke to show you how the session will run and who is with us.
Great. Thanks very much, Stefan. First of all, I would like to thank Network Smart Production to giving us the opportunity to give some information on the information exchange model on CoCs. I really hope that today's session will be useful for all of you. This part of the event will be presented by Roelof de Graaf, who is the EUCARIS Manager Operations, and by me. Who am I? I am Itzke Dijkstra. I'm working for RDW, the Netherlands Vehicle Authority. And I'm also the Secretariat of EUCARIS, and I'm the Secretariat of EReg Topic Group 1 and Topic Group 12. EReg and EUCARIS will be explained in more detail, so I come to my position later. That will get a little bit clear when we present the slides. And well, since 2003, I'm very much involved in international data exchange. That was the day that I got a job at RDW in the Netherlands, and I also started my first specifications for the EUCARIS system. So that is already a long time ago. Next slide, Roelof. The topics that Roelof and myself will cover today are, first of all, EReg, then EUCARIS. And I will give a very small introduction on the EReg TAM topic group that was involved with the data exchange of CoCs. Roelof then will give an overview of the information exchange model, more on the technical side. And then I will give a short overview of the content and the timeline of the legislation that deals with the exchange of CoCs. And we will close this session with a status update on the implementation of the model in the member states. But first, two abbreviations that will come along during the presentation of the slides. The first one is IVI. IVI stands for Initial Vehicle Information, and this is actually the electronic format of the certificate of conformity that is being exchanged between registration authorities and also between manufacturers and registration authorities. And this IVI holds the certificate of conformity, the electronic certificate of conformity. We all know the paper format, but we have now the digital format, and this digital format of the CoC is converted into a technical message, and this is called IVI, Initial Vehicle Information. So these two terms will be mentioned during the presentation, and I think it's a good idea to already explain this to you, so it will not be a complete mess and very unclear probably. So I hope this is clear. Then first of all, what is EReg? Some of you perhaps heard of this. This is an umbrella organization, an association, an international association of European vehicle and driver registration authorities. The cooperation started in 2005, and in 2012 it became an AISBL, and this is an legal entity according to Belgium law. Next slide. This cooperation of national vehicle and driver registration authorities have some common goals. They all want to exchange knowledge and experiences and best practices. They will follow European developments, and they also all together want to contribute to European laws and regulations, and also establish cooperation arrangements with relevant third parties. I will give an overview of that later. And they also want to promote effective and efficient data exchange. The cooperation of countries is also organized in a special structure. First of all, we have the general meeting in TAP, where all the member states that are part of EReg have a vote in this general meeting. Then there is a chair. The chair is supported by the secretariat and by an advisory board of maximum 6 of the members. And under this chairman, secretariat and advisory board, there are several EReg topic groups. And one of the topic groups is the topic group on the exchange of CoC information. Next slide. The EReg office is situated in Brussels. A lot of topics, of course, start in Brussels, and it's very important to be very close to there where the decision making is happening, in a Rue Froissart. Next slide, Roelof. Currently, we have 5 topic groups. The first one is on international data exchange, and the second one in row is actually the one on the CoC data exchange. Then we have topic group 19 on virtual driving licenses. We've got a topic group 21 on registration processes, vehicle registration processes and data quality. And there is the task force on data protection. So in case of data breaches, etc., this task force can be joined and grouped together. So these are the actual running topic groups, and we have a lot of topic groups that already have been finished. You can find, those are on the next slide, Roelof. Several topic groups, information on this can be found on the EReg website. Next slide.
And then you forgot the dynamic vehicle characteristics.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
The new one.
Yeah, there is one new topic group 22 on dynamic vehicle characteristics and software updates. So they just started and had their first kickoff meeting a week ago.
Okay.
Next slide. Well, 29 member states are gathered in EReg, all vehicle and driver registrations of the following countries. And in this EReg network, next slide, these authorities are all representing their specific member states. And I see a question coming by, and indeed, we do want to harmonize our processes as much as possible. And I think we come back to that later when we also discuss the data exchange models on the CoC data. So this is the EReg network of the members that are actually connected to the network itself. Then we have the network of stakeholders, and there are a lot, and of course the European Commission, but also ASEA and ASEM are grouped in this gathering of stakeholders. Yeah, I will come back to that for the timeline. And then the next slide, Roelof. We also ally with other umbrella organizations like AMVA, that's the umbrella organization in America of vehicle and driver registration authorities, Austroads in Australia and New Zealand. And there is a partner agreement between CIECA and CITA, and CITA is the worldwide umbrella organization for organizations that are involved, especially in PTI. Next slide, Roelof. And one of the most important things, because EReg is very much involved in international data exchange between registration authorities, there was always a very strong link with EUCARIS. Actually, EUCARIS is even older than EReg, and EReg more or less emerged from EUCARIS. And I will hand over now the presentation to Roelof, who will give some additional information on EUCARIS.
Thank you, Itske. My name is Roelof de Graaf. I'm the manager operations of EUCARIS, but also working as an IT advisor at RDW, the Dutch Vehicle Authority. I'm an IT guy, a lot of IT experience, and since 2006 I'm involved with the European International Data Exchange, and my email address is over here. What is EUCARIS? Well, EUCARIS, in fact, we use the word EUCARIS for three things. And this slide summarizes it all, and I will go through the three things later on. EUCARIS is a network of countries, where EReg is a network of vehicle registration authorities. EUCARIS is a network of countries working together on the international data exchange for mobility-related data and transport-related data. To start EUCARIS, there was written the EUCARIS Treaty, where 5 countries in Europe started this EUCARIS implementation and the EUCARIS data exchange. And the EUCARIS organization has come from that. The general rules for this EUCARIS organization and what the application is and does are in the EUCARIS Treaty, which is currently, I think, ratified by 9 countries, and 10 and 11 are coming at this moment. So it's a multilateral treaty. I have a slide on that. Let's talk about it later. If you need to know anything about EUCARIS, we have our website, www.eucaris.net. Otherwise, you can send Itske or me a mail. That's also okay. If we can explain you, we will tell you. Oh, what is EUCARIS then? Well, the legislation part of EUCARIS is started with the EUCARIS Treaty, which described the basic legislation for exchanging technical vehicle information and driving license information between the countries that ratified the treaty. So that's where it started. It also laid down the governance of the system, the EUCARIS system, the EUCARIS application, and that's also in the EUCARIS treaty. In 2015, this treaty is changed, and it was said that the EUCARIS system could also be used for other legislation. It was already done by then, but it is officially changed in 2015. So this other legislation, most of this legislation come from the EU, and that's about technical vehicle data. It's about owner-holder information on vehicles, driving license information, transport undertaking information, and some other details. Some countries also use it for bilateral agreements, like the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. We exchange owner-holder data, for instance, for parking offenses, which is not covered by any EU laws. So we have a trilateral agreement over there, and also Liechtenstein, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland have some agreement between each other where they can exchange owner-holder information. So it is also used in bilateral or multilateral agreements. So, but the basis in EUCARIS is that there should always be a legal base to exchange the data, because technically we can exchange everything, but it should also be allowed. And since we are also talking about personal data most of the time, it is, it's valuable that you have to have a legal base. Then the organization. Well, the organization of EUCARIS looks a bit like the organization of EReg. We have our highest authority, which is the General Assembly, where all countries have a vote. So not all the members, but all the countries have a vote. It's a people's network also, of people working together. We have a chairman who is elected every 3 years. Then we have 2 tasks that are done by nominated parties. One is the ICT task. That's the development and operation of the EUCARIS application. That's nominated for 5 years every time, and it is currently done by the Netherlands, by RDW. And also the secretariat. It's our secretariat, or is our head of secretariat, let's say it that way. And it's just appointed for 3 years again, and it's also done. So currently, for the next 3 years, it will be in the Netherlands. The governance description is in the EUCARIS treaty, but also a lot in the underlying rules of procedure, where all the tasks of the nominated parties, for instance, are in the rules of procedure. Then there is the application. It's a generic data exchange system, and I always have to tell what it's not. It's not a central database or something like that. It's not a central repository. It's not an EU system, because it's used in a lot of EU legislation, but it's not an EU system. The governance is by this countries working together in this EUCARIS organization. And it's developed and maintained by the EUCARIS organization for all the EUCARIS organization users. I will tell more about it in the how section, or in the later section. So which data is exchanged in EUCARIS? Well, it all started with technical vehicle data, then vehicle owner-holder data, and insurance data was added, information was added. It's all based on a generic layer, which does the actual data exchange, and we built on top of this layer, we built specific functionality. Well, one of the things to mention is the most known probably is the CBE directive, where there's a cross-border exchange for specific traffic violations. So if you are speeding in one country, this country can ask the country where you are living for your details, so they can send you a letter at home. So that is why our CBE exchanges owner-holder information. And of course, the EU Directive 2018/858, which is about the CoC and type approval data, and we will talk about it a lot more today. And there, EUCARIS is appointed to define the actual structure of this IVI message of this eCoC on the technical side, where the functional side is done by the EU forum. And where is EUCARIS used? There was also a question. I thought it was currently it's used in 36 countries, so it's wider than the EU. There are 41 connections because some countries have 2 connections. We exchange about 150 million messages per year. And if you want to see more detail about the different services and which countries are connected to which functional service, you can look at the URL. You will get the presentation after the seminar this day, so you can use this URL to check which countries are involved and which countries are not. So now we have introduced EUCARIS a little bit, and we have introduced EReg. And then if you look at how do we work together, where EReg works more on the policy making process, on the policy evaluation, thinking with the EC, with the members about which policies do we need, how can we implement policies. And EUCARIS is more on the operational side, on the implementation of the policies. And the most viewable cooperation is in EReg topic group 1, which is about international data exchange, and which covers all these different subjects and talks about new data exchanges, talks about problems with the current data exchanges, and so on. So in EReg topic group 1, there is a big cooperation of EUCARIS and EReg visible, but also in other topic groups, and Itzke will tell you about another topic group now.
Okay, so Itzke, do you want to take this, or should we take the poll now?
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly the question in the poll, but I think it's okay.
I think let's continue with this topic, and after this we would do the poll, because I think we should do it right before the other topic. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, then I'll continue. Why a topic group within EReg on the exchange of CoC data? Well, it was actually quite obviously because a lot of vehicle registration authorities, the vehicle registration itself, they all a lot of them were based on the type approval data. Up until now for some parties, but in the Netherlands, for instance, until 2010, everything was still based on the type approval data and with type, variant, and version data. And these data include ranges for numerous vehicles. So that very much differs, of course, from the CoC, because the CoC data are the data for one unique vehicle. And with this CoC data, your vehicle register contains exact data instead of the inexact data that you are going to register when you register a vehicle based on the type approval data. So it was for the Netherlands, but also for Germany and for France, it was quite obvious that it would be important to change this type approval registered base to the CoC registration. But there was one problem. The CoC is completely on paper format in that day. So the first change should be how are we going to make this CoC digital? Next slide. So during the EReg conference in May 2011, there was a decision by all members that a topic group should be set up that should have a closer look on the establishment of a harmonized international eCoC and the data exchange of this data. All to improve the quality of the CoC data and also to improve the quality of the vehicle registers in all the member states. And because EReg was especially focused on the vehicle registers, we asked TAM, and TAM is the Type Approval Authority meeting, the meeting of the type approval authorities, to support this topic group. Because without the people who are working on the type approvals and the CoCs, it was very difficult for the vehicle registration authorities to move on. So the topic group was set up. Next slide, Roelof. And currently we have 21 active members with 7 reading members and participation of the European Commission, DG GROW and DG Klima. And also the manufacturers are presented in this topic group via ASEA and ASEM. And the topic group has now been working together for 12 years now. And some of the things that we proposed, or not some, a lot of the things already have been included in legislation. And before the legislation was there, also the technical model was already implemented. So it was a little bit, the same pace. The technical system and the legislation went more or less in the same pace. But Roelof will now tell something more about this technical part.
Yeah, and before we go to the next technical part, we have a quick polling or a survey for you guys. So you could help us, the group, to understand better where you are. So Paulina, can you pull up the poll, please?
So we will ask about which companies in the audience actually send at the moment eCoCs to the authorities.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, it's not about the EU authority, but it's about a type approval authority, which should have the CoCs.
Yes. Probably give it a minute or so, Paulina.
Yes, it looks like we still can wait a little bit. Because the answers are still coming.
We already talked a lot of people to sleep, I think.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, let's give it a couple more seconds here. So.
Okay, I think we have already results, so I will finish the survey at the moment. Can everybody see? Okay, so it looks like the majority of the companies, as I said before, are still not sending the electronic CoCs, and we don't know what is the reason, but it looks like we see six companies from the audience already do send eCoCs.
Good. Do we have? Should we tackle one more question, Itzke or Roelof, or should we continue and take them at the end?
Well, I think we better continue first. Maybe we can already answer some subjects in the presentations we do, and then look at the questions at the end.
Makes sense. Okay, it's all back to you. Thank you, Paulina.
Okay, let me see. I think you will see, you are now viewing at my presentation again. I hope so, because I cannot see what the participants see of the attendees see, but I think it's on now. Let's continue. As it's already said, I will give an overview of the eCoC information exchange model, which we also would like to use for type approval data, type approval information. So let me explain that. What is the model? Well, the model is like we have with vehicle registrations in Europe. Each organization that has a role who has the role of a type approval authority has its own eCoC register. That is what is written in the legislation. That the type approval authority that approved the vehicle type also should have the CoCs for these vehicles that are produced. So, and the manufacturers send the eCoC to the type approval authority after production of the vehicle. So when the vehicle is born, you can also say that the eCoC is a vehicle's birth certificate. Then the type approval should make the eCoC available to the public and also to the vehicle registration authorities, but I will get to that. But to the public, it's not really clear how that will be done. And currently the EC, and it's will probably also tell a little bit about that, is writing an implementing regulation to specify this, and maybe a next regulation also. So I cannot tell you at this moment how it will be shared with the public. But I know how it is shared with the vehicle registration authorities. And because they are using EUCARIS, and the type approval authorities can also connect their eCoC register to EUCARIS. So the vehicle registration authorities can subscribe to the eCoCs, and they can say, well, I want all from you. I want to have all eCoCs. Of course, then you have a copy of the eCoC register, so that might not be always a good idea. But there are two fields in the eCoC that can point to the country that should be intended for registration. So there is the intended registration country, which is an attribute in the eCoC. It's not mandatory, but if it's there and it is your country, you get forwarded the eCoC when it arrives at the type approval authority. Then also it can also be forwarded based on the type approval ID, so the E number, the E1, E2, E3. For instance, if let's say from the type approval authority in a small type approval authority doesn't want to have its own CoC register, but organizes with, for instance, Germany or the Netherlands to have the eCoCs in the eCoC register in the Netherlands, for instance, then you can also forward that to that specific eCoC. So the Netherlands can say, well, we want to have all E1s, or we want to have all E13s, and so on. So we get a copy of that. And the other way around, so this is automatic forwarding. So if the CoC arrives at the type approval authority, you get a copy of it. The other way around is that you can do it on request. So you have a vehicle you want to register, you know its type number, and so you also know which type approval authority you should ask. So you can request the eCoC based on the VIN. The data distribution model for delivering the eCoCs looks like this. So you have on the top, you have the different manufacturers in the world. They can connect to the type approval authority, to the European type approval authority via the internet. Of course, you have to build a secure tunnel for that. And you have to discuss with your type approval authority how to do that. But when it arrives at this type approval authority, it arrives in EUCARIS, and it is decided if, well, it of course it goes to the CoC register, but it's also decided within EUCARIS if it should be forwarded to another type approval authority or to a registration authority. And this forwarding is then done via the European tester network, because the EUCARIS international data communication runs via the tester network. Then how does that look like at the type approval authority? You have the manufacturer coming in via the internet. Of course, you have something like a firewall over there. Then we have this is the situation currently in the Netherlands, but I think it's more of a reference implementation. You have the IVI server with some component on it that can check the the message, can check the XSD, but also can check the plausibility of different things. For instance, if you have a specific type of vehicle, for instance, M1 category, you have to fill in specific fields, and if you have an N1 category, you have to fill in other fields. That is what we call the plausibility check, and that is also done at the front side of the system. And if there is something wrong, the manufacturer gets back a report of what is wrong, and then can adapt the eCoC and then send it again. If it passes this XSD and is the plausibility check, it is forwarded to EUCARIS. EUCARIS is configured to send it forward to what we call the local data service, and the local data service sends it to the register. So it's stored in the register at the type approval authority. But it also looks in the EUCARIS also has the configuration of this subscription mechanism. So if there is somebody subscribed to this type of eCoCs, it will queue it, and then it will asynchronously be forwarded to all the other parties that are interested in the eCoCs. So it looks like this. The eCoC is produced at the manufacturer. It is signed with a signing certificate, we hope, and it will be an obligation from the legislation in the near future. The eCoC is signed, so we know who is responsible for the contents of this eCoC. It is forwarded via the internet to the IVI server. It is forwarded to EUCARIS. EUCARIS sends it to the eCoC register, and also if there are some subscriptions, it is forwarded to the other countries. So that's the way it works at the type approval authority. And so it can be one country, but it can be also more countries that are interested in this eCoC. And also if there is a request from the other side, so that's the request type message. Another EU country needs the eCoC. This request will come in via the tester network to EUCARIS. EUCARIS will call this local data service and will get the eCoC from the register, if it is there, of course. So what functionality is in EUCARIS? Well, it's the retrieval and the forwarding of this IVI eCoCs, but also the validation. So if you have an eCoC and you want to validate it against type approval data, you can do that. It's already told the type approval data contains ranges. So let's say the range of the weight is 1,000 to 1,100 kilos. And you get the eCoC that says the vehicle is 533 kilos. Well, you can check that with the type approval data that is not okay, that the vehicle cannot be that light because it's not in the range of the type approval. So and there are a lot of fields with these ranges and so on. So the validation of this IVI can be an important thing. And of course, not every country can do that because not all countries have this type approval data already. Some countries already have a type approval data register, like the Netherlands, and I think Germany also has it. So probably we can do that. But there will also be, currently topic group 12 of EReg is working on electronic message for the exchange of type approval information and the type approval information that is needed to check the eCoCs. So probably in the next years, this will be available to all countries, and every country can do this validation on themselves. But for now, it is a asynchronous way of sending it to another country and receiving the validation results that can be done in EUCARIS. And then there's also the notification of correction, and that means we have retrieved we have received eCoC from a manufacturer. It's in our IVI register. Then the manufacturer finds that there is something wrong with the eCoC and sends an updated version of it. If we receive that and we see, well, there was already one and that is already retrieved by some other country, we can send this EV correction notification message. So the country that already used the eCoC probably for the registration gets a notification that there is something changed to the IVI, and they should get a new version of the IVI from the type approval authority. So that's the updated version of the, or a correction of the IVI. Everything about IVI starts at, in fact, for EUCARIS starts at eucaris.net in the knowledge base, and the URL is at the bottom of this of the screen. And if you need more information, let us know. Of course, I can tell you much more about it, but I think that's not the place at this moment. So then, let's look at the timeline, the much requested timeline, Itzke.
Yeah.
People want to know it.
Yeah, very important. Well, there is some time. This was a timeline that was provided in combination with the timeline of the European Commission, I think in 2019. The first implementing act that was announced for the eCoC has been delivered for feedback in September 2020 and got into force in February 2021. But the most important dates is when are things mandatory. So the next slide. It all happens in 25 and 26. At the 1st of September 2025, the type approval authorities should be ready to receive the IVI messages. And as from the 5th of July 2026, the manufacturers should have been migrated to the eCoC completely, so we can really get rid of the paper format. Yeah, next slide. And then this first implementing act that I just told you about, this was published in February 2021 and will get into force at the 1st of January 2023, so that's within a month. And in this first implementing act, a part of the model that Roelof described is being included. So EUCARIS is designated as to be the system for the exchange of the data between the authorities. The eCoC is in a uniform way via XML structure and via the XML technology. It is all based on the IVI message as defined by EReg Topic Group 12 and implemented by EUCARIS. And in the implementing act, there are different dates mentioned. That changes have to be within the IVI message and to be used by the type approval authorities. So you can have a look at this first implementing act for this part. But then not everything is being covered yet. So the European Commission is currently busy with the development of a second implementing act. The draft of this implementing act has been published for feedback. This feedback has been closed, I think, yesterday, but I'm not completely sure. And a next version will be discussed in the Motor Vehicle Working Group of 15 December next month, or this month. We are at the 1st of December, of course. And ultimately, it will be decided by the Technical Committee Motor Vehicles. And probably the implementing act will then enter into force at the 1st of January 2024. And in this implementing act, there are requirements, more detailed requirements for the secure data exchange, so the signing of the messages, etc. And some words on the validation procedure of an IVI message. Currently, we have discussed this second implementing act by the EReg Topic Group last week in Brussels, and the comments of the first comments that will be delivered in the coming days, and the countries will take with them these EReg comments also during the Motor Vehicle Working Group. The challenges we still have to face are, well, the change procedure of the IVI has to be, of course, in line with the legislation. And legislation comes from different angles within the European Commission. So this is always, a challenge to get all those challenges streamlined. One very important thing is the versioning and the backwards compatibility of the IVI versions. When there is a new type of legislation, there will be a new IVI version, but the IVI messages, you have to communicate these various versions between the countries, of course. So there is a mechanism for that, and EUCARIS is busy to keep all those different messages in place, but also the countries do have work to do, and also the manufacturers. Then we've got the problem of multi-stage vehicles, or not a problem, but a challenge. And I saw already a question on this. It is still not completely sure how to handle multi-stage vehicles. There is some legislation on this, and this legislation is not very handy when it comes to the implementation on the technical side. So we would like to have a different technical solution, but then on the other way, you have to change the legislation for that. So we are still in discussion on that. Then, of course, it's very important that all manufacturers deliver the data in the same way. So there is a acceptance procedure by the various type approval authorities who are already communicating with these manufacturers. And of course, to make the whole exchange model as smooth as possible, this should be harmonized, of course, so that there are no mistakes between the various stakeholders. And of course, the data should be of good quality. So validation is important. Next slide. This data quality can be assured via the digital signatures, the technical control via the XSD check, Roelof already mentioned, the plausibility control, and the check against the type approval, last but not least. And this one is made now in cooperation with EUCARIS. Next slide. Then what are we going to do now on the legal side? Of course, the legislation is still not finished. Probably not all the requirements will be handled by the second implementing act, and probably there will be even a third implementing act or implementing regulation. We are currently already busy with an IVI version 1.9, the type approval message, and we would like to have that in legislation as well. And together with the TAM, Type Approval Authority meeting, and the enforcement forum of the European Commission, it is very important that all those stakeholders are in close contact. And currently, I think, especially the communication with the forum, I think we should give some more efforts on that. So that is for the legal part.
It will take a long time before the next meeting of the Topic Group 12, I see. Since 2032.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's a problem. That's in 10 years.
But I think you mean March next year.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then let me tell you a little bit about the status of the implementation, the current status of the implementation, because Itzke told you that it is not necessary yet to implement it. It will be required only since 2025, so there is some time to go. Currently, there are already a lot of countries are working on it. I mentioned, if you look at the bottom of the slide, I mentioned Norway and Lithuania, but there are all other countries. A lot of other countries are already working on the vehicle register. But the data exchange via EUCARIS is done by these countries, Germany and the Netherlands and Belgium. The three of us started together to bring it in production and to learn from how it works and so on. And since then, a lot of other countries joined the exchange. Most of them currently do not deliver eCoCs, but only request eCoCs. But they are working on the implementation of an eCoC register, or have asked the Netherlands or Germany to have their eCoC register. So we are currently acceptance testing with Romania, which will come. So the map, I hope in 2-3 years, the map will be completely green. But as I already said, there is still some time to go. The type approval authority should be ready to connect in September 2025. It's told you. Some countries indicated to work on it in 2023. We have in our General Assembly, we always have a tour de table, as we say it, and then we always ask, what are you working on next year? And a number of them indicated they will be working on the implementation of the IVI messages. So that's great. A lot of countries are working on the eCoC register because they have to be ready in 2025, of course. And we also had a lot of visits of countries that want to know how we did it. And we helped them to introduce our model. And so we also know that these countries are thinking about it, are working about it. So yeah, it will happen in the next years, I think. So that's what we wanted to tell. I think it's now time for a question also from a poll again. And then we will go over to the question and answers session. So I will stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, Rudolf, thank you very much. Actually, we're going to go directly to the presentation of Jens and do the next poll after that.
Okay.
So I will hand over to Jens.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, Rudolf and Itzke, for the insights. And welcome also from me. Yeah, a short word for me. I'm at VCX Product Owner of our tool VCX, and with that, having some experience in implementing the whole process of the electronic CoC transmission. And yeah, what I want to do is just share a bit of our experiences and insights we had from that process in the past. What I will talk about in the next 20 minutes, I'll just give a short introductional plea, let's say, to point out the chances for the future we are getting from a procedure like this, because from the manufacturer's point of view, how do we benefit from the digitalization that is going on here? Then I want to talk briefly about what I experienced in terms of the transmission from going from paper CoCs to an electronic CoC as a real paradigm shift and a complete different way of thinking about these documents and the data. And out of that, some recommendations and some experiences we had from there, just to share that with you. So this is all from, let's say, more the manufacturer's point of view and not from the recipient's point of view, and really seeing coming from a paper CoC process, how would we implement that? Yeah, so what we see really is that this introduction of electronic documents is in the end a trigger for homologation processes to be overall digitalized. I hope it will get clear throughout the process why we think that, throughout the presentation, why we think that is the case. But the good thing about that is that while digitalization is happening throughout vehicle manufacturers everywhere and improving processes tremendously, homologation processes are not mostly in the focus, in the center of focus when it comes to digitalization. And here's really a trigger we can take to improve processes in that area. And that just comes along with the usual effects of digitalization. What you get out of that is, in the end, that you have really an improved quality and much less errors throughout your process, because what happens is if you digitalize, you usually have a process which is centrally governed by a tool from the beginning to the end. So you have always a clear understanding of the status of your documents, the status of your data, the status of the process, and also the data which are used in the process are handed through the process. So that means in the end that you're not manually transferring data from one department to the next, copy pasting and so on, which always is a area where errors happen. So it improves the quality. The process is much quicker, just because well, what you would else do manually, like copy pasting and aligning on the status, can be done automatically. And in the end, as a result, you get higher customer satisfaction, just because the delivery of your products is seamless and without any issues in the way. So what I want to say is, for us, we see this really as an opportunity for manufacturers to digitalize the homologation process and get that more streamlined and get that more efficient and get that in a higher quality. And in the end, for you to focus much stronger on the actual homologation of your products. So I see the whole transition from a paper to a digital document really as what I would call a paradigm shift. So that means it's a change in how we think about these documents, about the data, and a change in how we do things. Why is that? Well, let's start with who those documents are for. The paper documents, the paper CoCs, but also paper type approvals, paper information documents, paper registration documents, in the end are designed for a human reader. And what does that require? It requires things like that information needs to be accessible for human eyes. You need to be able to find the data. You need to be able to understand the data. You need to be able to scan. It should look good. It should look well structured from seeing the data. And the other thing about human readers, which is important, is that if things are unclear, though, or if you cannot answer, let's say, formally, or the answer is somewhat complicated to any question, you can explain, and human readers understand explanations. So you can put footnotes, you can put additional comments, you can also, instead of answering the question on a specific number with a clear answer, you can maybe give a range or give some additional hints. So these are the two aspects. Visually, it should be accessible for a human reader. On the other hand, you can use explanations, and human readers do understand explanations. Of course, readers are slow readers. That's maybe a disadvantage. The important thing for me is this kind of document is best created by a human. So if you want to create a document which is readable for a human, it's best actually created by a human, because you can actually look at it and best think about whether it's well accessible. Now, going to electronic documents, we see a machine reader here. We see a computer reading, and that's a completely different way of accessing data. So you have to be very strict on the data structures. Information has to be always put in the same, with the same keys, with the same technical structure behind it, so that the machine can find it. And it's very strict on the format of data. So if the machine expects a number format, you have to pass a number format. That comes along with quality. Roloff put some hints on that with XSD validations, for instance, you can actually validate that what you expect in the data is correct. But for the machine reader, this is really important, because otherwise it will possibly not be able to evaluate any of the contents properly. So what a machine reader cannot do is understand any, let's say, sideways. It does not allow for compromises. If you give an explanation why you didn't put a number here but something else, your computer won't understand that, right? On the other hand, it's a very fast reader, so processes can speed up very much. But to guarantee this, and that's, I think, for me, an important point, to guarantee the strictness of the data and the data structures and the data content, actually the data should be provided and produced by a machine, by a computer. And that's, I think, the most important point. Doing this somehow without IT support in there, but in some manual process might be difficult. Yeah. Some other thoughts on paper and what we can say goodbye to soon. This is just some random example. In this case, a category T CoC, second page. And what you see here is the following. On paper, you have topics like corporate design. You want to have your logo somewhere. You want it to look nice. You want it to look agreeable. In the end, it's one of the products you produce besides the car you're selling. And it should look just as good. So marketing will be involved. So that's one thing you have with it when you produce paper CLCs. The next thing is you want to fit it on the paper. Ideally, you would have, let's say, one sheet of paper, both sides printed, for instance, foldable, and that's your ideal CLC. In this nice example, we have page 2 of 5. In category T, we stopped even trying to get all the data that are required on one sheet of paper. In other cases, there's a lot of effort going on to somehow squeeze the data into one A4 paper to save paper, of course, and also because it is easier to get the paper together. Next problem you will have is how do I get those tables that have been designed by the regulation into the format, right? These tables tend to grow to the left, to the right, to the bottom. And squeezing all the information in there, you might have to split tables, you might have to make text smaller or larger. And last but not least, how do you make the paper copy-proof? That's a requirement. And you have a process about providing duplicates. How do you do that? All of these are paper thoughts, right? Duplicates you only need as long as you have paper. If you have a digital data centrally provided, you won't need that anymore. So all of these paper thoughts will fortunately be going away sooner or later. We heard it, at least for categories M, N, and O, the paper CoC will not be mandatory anymore by 2026. And I'm sure that the other vehicle categories will follow. What we get instead is what we just saw already. We have paths of authentication. We have to avoid a manipulation of data, and we have to ensure secure transmissions. So that's all the technical details about how to pass the information. An interesting topic, which I find is always a bit of a challenge for the digital process, is whenever you have exceptions. So if you have some, let's say, very innovative products, and somehow you are really not able to enter the data according to the regulation, but still get an approval, you will have interesting topics to discuss, I'm pretty sure. But those are more the exceptional cases. So, as an outlook, just a small anecdote from the homologation conference in Munich recently, organized by the TÜV Süd. There was a presentation, one of the speakers shared thoughts about the possibility of having in the future not only extensions of type approvals, but what they called expansions, which would mean that you actually do retrospective extensions of your approval, which can be assigned and made relevant to vehicles already registered. And the idea was then you can update the IVI later for the already registered vehicle. And then somebody else in the audience said, but wait, the CoC is a birth certificate. You cannot just change that later. And that is true if you think about the CoC. And on the other hand, I thought this thought is really interesting, because if you go away from paper and have data instead, you will have a history of data, and data can change through time. You can have versioning, you can have a history of how that vehicle changed. If later the vehicle gets built differently, for instance, you could have those changes going on. Possibly this is something that's allowed with data, which with paper you would never see, because paper is a one sheet of paper, and that doesn't change anymore, right? So I think these are tendencies in which direction processes like these can go if you go away from paper. And the accessibility is different. There was a talk also from a policeman who was complaining about difficulties finding information on which tire combinations are actually allowed in the vehicle, because he had 5 different sheets of paper, a registration certificate, a CoC, and so on, and was never sure where to find the information he just needs at the moment. So central accessibility and transparency of those data will be the other effect. we will see in the future, I think. Reality check, well, that was nice to hear, but on the other hand, we currently have a mixture of both paper and data processes. Type approval applications are still yet done in paper and produce data which are coming from, let's say, paper thinking. And CoCs in paper still exist on, and that creates two kinds of obstacles. Basically, either you have a human writer serving data to a machine reader, which is creating issues because suddenly you have data not accepted by the computer, or you have to somehow transform those data, which is always cumbersome, or you have already, for instance, done digitalization on your side for creating the paper documents. Then you will have the experience that creating, let's say, well-readable, nice-looking paper documents automated by central data can lead to very complicated questions, unintended side breaks, page breaks, and things like that, because in the end, the machine writer is not designing for the human reader. So, what have I learned through the past out of all of this? I'm just showing some very few examples of things that happened from transferring, let's say, from paper CoCs to the electronic CoCs. And you might possibly, if you already looked at it, have found similar things. With the strictness of data. If you are not yet looking at the electronic CoC, I would still recommend to start looking at strictness of formalities of data now already, because we had situations where introducing the electronic CoC, we suddenly see, let's say, this example, number of wheels, a number field containing the entry 2 and in brackets optionally 4, because you could also put twin wheels on those axles. And I mean, it was approved like that. The paper CoC looked like that. So the expectation was, now I need an electronic CoC and I won't fit it in. What I can, of course, do as a workaround is always put that somewhere in the comments field at the end of the, in the electronic CoC as well. But ideally, you would, let's say, put that whole topic one level up and try to already think about your approval and the data that go into the whole thing. Explanatory notes and footnotes on tire combinations, for instance, I see quite a lot. And well, you can put everything in the comments, obviously, but it's hidden there, and machines will possibly not connect the dots, right? So it's just clear from my side to start thinking now already maybe about whether footnotes and additional explanations can be avoided in the one place or other. And if you're thinking, working on tire combination tables and so on, especially in agricultural vehicles, those tables can be very large in the coupling tables. On paper, I see a lot of either having that in the attachments, we did that in the beginning as well when we were looking about paper CoCs, or images included within the files. And just to be aware that on electronic CoCs, you have to, for instance, put all the tire combination data, all the possible tire combinations explicitly in the IVI. So you have to be able to handle those data. Next one, data structures and thinking in objects. Just a small example for axles. The CoC is more or less a flat list of questions organized by topics. And you can find then data for specific parts of your vehicle actually rather distributed throughout the CoC, which is totally okay if you have a paper document, because there it's more like you have the mass information, and there you have information about the mass of the axle per axle. You have dimension information in a different place. In the IVI, you can see on the right side, then is organizing that into, well, an axle object, which actually comprehends all the axle information into one object. And also you can see a small difference if you look very closely, that the number and position of steered axles is on the left side in the agricultural vehicles, at least, always done with the F for front axle, R for rear axle, F and R for both. While the IVI is doing something different. It's for each axle stating steered axle indicator yes or no, right axle indicator, yes or no. What I want to point out is that this object structure is actually rather nice. If you think about how your product is designed, you can already start thinking in components and trying to organize your data like that. And what I would recommend is when you start into this process, it's much easier to come from the the object structure on the right side to the flat CoC structure than the other way around. So what I would really recommend is trying to implement something which is more close to the IVI structure on your side when you handle your data, and produce the left side structure out of that. Not necessarily following the IVI in all respects. Maybe you have some places where you want your own way of structuring data to produce the IVI out of that. But yeah, that structure definitely helps you to organize your data well. Getting close to the end. One thing, if you start looking for a solution or implementing a solution on your side, be sure to expect constant change at the moment. This whole process, you see it is still developing, and it's growing, and we see both the documents, the contents of the documents changing rapidly, and also processes changing rapidly at the moment. We are also not yet sure how national registration processes will look in the future with the electronic CoC in place. There are some ideas around, but we're learning, for instance, from the KBA now, step by step in multiple emails, how they're solving the extraction of the national data out of the electronic CoC into the new process. So things are constantly changing, and that will be ongoing for quite some time. Make sure to find a solution which can handle that change. So do not rigidly structure your database so that you cannot easily expand it. Rather have some kind of schemata you can version where you can go from one version to the next easily. Have workflows configurable on your side to be able to quickly react if, for instance, processes change, new endpoints are introduced, new processes for registration or for sending documents are changed. So involve your IT in that early to think about a good process or search for good solutions out there. And yeah, last topic maybe for now, the whole process of your data is going basically in a cycle from engineering of collecting the data through the type approval, preparing for your production, and then in the production delivering your CoC. The data you're putting on electronic CoCs is usually produced rather early. It starts in engineering, maybe some come through the type approval. It's currently with the electronic CoC consumed in production. And what I want to just point out is please make sure that you find a process where you don't find problems with your data, which create issues for producing, for instance, electronic CoCs when you're preparing for the production at that late point in time. So try to get the data strictness and the digitalization of your processes and the providing of the data in the correct format earlier, at least at the type approval state, for instance, or even into engineering if that's somehow possible. Just as an outlook, also in the homologation conference, the topic was again large about digital type approvals in the future. Also, the RDW was presenting a solution already in that direction for tire approvals, and there is a working group in Germany working on a digital information document for a whole vehicle type approval as well. So those topics which we are seeing now on the CoC level will be extracted to the complete information document sooner or later. One thing I expect to be happening in that is that we have to learn to put less information into attachments and rather be stricter on the information document contents again. We will see much quicker approval processes, and that will make iterations much more frequent, I think, which will be interesting to see. And what we will see, hopefully, is much better data, or much more of data exchange and collaboration of the stakeholders in this process of getting the type approval. So data exchange between manufacturer, the technical services, and the approval authorities, all working more or less together on one data set. So I think this is just what I expect to be coming next, and I think what we can start preparing, at least mentally, already for. And yeah, that's it from my side. So I managed to keep in the 20 minutes more or less that I had. Thanks for your for listening, and yeah, happy to hear any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Jens. We will come back to the question panels, but first of all, we have another survey for our guests, and I will try to play it on for everyone. But I see like kind of both of them were played. That can't be. Okay. So the question now is about challenges that the companies who already sent eCoCs have met on the road. And this is, I think, a multiple choice survey. Okay. So we will give a couple of seconds more for the survey, and after that, I will read the questions which came from our audience loud. And Itzke and Rolf, could you shortly answer them again? Say it's covered, or in case the question is not covered, it would be great if you could answer. Okay, I think we have the results already. So, okay, something else came. I will close it now and present to you the results. Say now, you should see now. Okay. Andrew, is there a chance to save the results somehow if I finish that survey?
Yeah, we will share those. You can continue with the Q&A session now.
Okie dokie. So I'm closing this, and I gathered 12 questions from the audience. I think many of them were already covered, but let's go through them again. So the first one is one of the goal also to have an equal registration process for vehicles of all classes all over European member states. This is an important process for manufacturer of vehicles.
I think that is a goal of EReg. EReg is is harmonizing in this, at least in this topic group 21, which data is registered in each country, how the processes flow, which evidences are needed for that, and also which statuses and which signals we exchange. So EReg is working on the harmonization of this. Also on the side of the European Commission, there is a revision of the roadworthiness package going on, which is partially about vehicle registration. There are also thoughts about harmonizing the procedures, but since the procedures are still on the national law and not on the European law, each country can decide to have different procedures.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Also, maybe extending question from my side, will it also impact all vehicle categories?
Yeah, it probably will. I don't know the timeline. Maybe Itzke has more information on the timeline of the other categories, but...
Yeah, when it comes to the IVI message itself, this message is already prepared for all other categories, but I do not know where or when those other categories will be mandatory. I think some of the legislation still has to be decided on. But they are all already included in the IVI messages.
Okay, that's great to know. Question number 2. Do you have an idea about the timeline for this process? And I think that was already covered in your presentation, the timeline. Okay. What is about United Kingdom after the Brexit?
We already answered that during the last poll or the first poll.
Yeah, that's what I think. The questions are gathered all together, I think. Mm-hmm. So the question is about now a KBA as of 1st of January 2023. Does no longer allow the use of technical additional data group and national data group. They are, however, still mentioned in the messenger book. As a result, the IVI files would no longer be harmonized. That's the question.
Yeah, well, eventually, both groups will be probably completely out of the IVI. We do not want to have national items in the IVI message. And the KBA or Germany already forbid the deliverance by manufacturers of these groups via the regular IVI message. So some countries are already preparing for the moment that those national items cannot be exchanged anymore by the EU IVI message. So either you have to rearrange your national registration procedure, or you have to develop a separate message with those national items. But eventually they will disappear from the IVI message. And Germany already changed this.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't have been in there from the start, I think, because they shouldn't have been in there from the start, I think, because you want one message that can be sent to all countries and not a message per country as we had in the past. That's the main idea about the IVI message. So if you have a registration process where you need extra information, you should have a national message for that. But it is probably for the registration and not for the eCoC.
Yeah. And if those data are very, very important, then you should make something happen that it is included in the type approval and the CoC. So at the end, that there is a harmonized procedure all over Europe, and you don't need those national items anymore. So that's also an answer on your first question about making the registration processes harmonized all over Europe. So, yeah. I think the CoC can be of help for that, to get rid of the national items.
Yes, I think that would be wonderful, because we talk to many manufacturers who actually struggle with export of products because of the difficulties with understanding the local laws in the countries. Another question here is about, I think, the timing. When should be the eCoC data sent from the manufacturer to the type approval authority?
Yeah.
When the vehicle is built, or when it is sold to a dealer or to a customer?
I think as soon as the vehicle is finished, it came from the production. So yeah, that would be the perfect timing. But yeah, but I think not. Is there a legal description on that? Do you know that, Roelof?
Isn't it in this new implementing act that it should be as soon as possible after production?
Yeah, as soon as possible. Yeah.
And we also know that the CoCs currently are sometimes used to deliver only when you have paid the vehicle or something like that. And but that, of course, is not the idea about the CoC where it should be used for. So you should have other means to do that.
So in general, it's required to register the produced vehicle, even though it's still not sold, but it's intended to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The other question, I think, also was already answered, and it relates to multi-stage vehicles. So how does the data flow work for multi-stage vehicles?
Yeah.
That was, I think, answered. And again, another question about the national registration processes impacted by EReg, EUCARIS initiatives. So how will it be divided? But that's something we already covered. Is eCoC also possible for base vehicles with an incomplete CoC that will be completed by a second stage type approval?
Yeah.
That's
yeah. The idea is that you get two CoCs probably, one of the first stage and one of the second stage, and they should be combinable. So they should have combined information.
Yeah, and they can be linked to each other based on the vehicle identification number. And there are now discussions going on that the second CoC should not encompass the data from the first CoC already, but technically speaking, it should be very nice that the second CoC includes all data. But yeah, there are discussions on that now. And from a legal point of view, you should have separate CoCs with the data in it that is applicable for that specific stage.
I see. Okay. So it looks like still a lot of things to decide and discuss.
Yeah.
And the next question is also related to vehicle categories. And it was also answered, I think, by now. So 2026, the eCoC will be mandatory for vehicles of category M and O. Is there any known effect or timelines for other vehicle categories in EU or national level already?
Well, the IVI message is ready for it. So changes are already included in the IVI messages when CoCs or when the layout is changed for other categories. This is included.
Mm-hmm. So we just know that 2026, the first group of categories, but the others will follow. It's not a question if, only it's already there, but not known.
And also, ASEM is also part of the EReg topic group and also follows the developments.
But of course, that's up to the EC to decide, and we can discuss with them about it. But they make the decisions.
Okay, the last two questions. Do other member states not in EUCARIS maybe have their own other system? Example, France.
No, as I already mentioned, all EU countries are already using EUCARIS.
Yeah.
So every country can use EUCARIS to exchange this information. It could be that the organization is not connected yet to their national contact point.
Yeah.
But for instance, for France, we already had been in contact with EUCAC, what was it, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
To discuss this. And they are working on the national register, and after that they will work on the implementation with EUCARIS.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And they've got some national items as well, and they will treat that also separately. So they are looking now for solutions, just as the KBA did.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. And the last question. What about the vehicles produced prior to 2026, where no eCoC is available, and for registration purposes, a duplicate CoC will be needed? Will the manufacturer still produce paper-based duplicate CoCs? Say for cars produced in 2024, 2025?
I think so. I'm not sure about it, but
yeah, and there will be the possibility to upload these kind of CoCs via a web interface.
Also,
so
yeah.
They can type it in also. So. And also in the regulation, as from 2026, there is still an escape that in very specific situations, paper forms should be exchanged. But that's only in very specific situations, stated in Article 36 and 37 of the type approval regulation.
Mm-hmm. So in case the original CoC was issued before 2026, and now there is a need for a duplicate, let's say in 2028.
Yeah.
It can still be issued in the form of a paper document as the original was.
Yeah, there is a clause in the legislation as I read it. But of course, that's my interpretation. And it's in Article 36 and 37. So there is still an opening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know that we received similar questions also before. So it's really so great to know all the answers now. And I think we are now way smarter than we were before we joined the meeting. We've learned from each other also. And I hope our guests also took a lot of value from this meeting. And thank you so much, Jens and Rulo, for all those great answers and this great presentation. And the same, Jens, thank you. Thank you so much. I will hand over to Andrew.
Yeah, thank you from my side as well. And Stefan, I will hand over back to you for the finishing.
Yep. Thank you, Andrew. So I have to open my camera.
So let me get your presentation out. Here you go.
Yes, my camera is on again. Yeah, thank you also from my side. Maybe I have a final question. First of all, thank you very much for teaching me. I was not really aware about all those processes, but I'm an old-timer freak and guy, and so I'm a little bit involved in those processes. I learned a lot today on CoCs and the type registration. And I have one maybe final question, maybe to Rudolf. What about the security of all those processes? I have in mind, and I would think about that this would be really a case that should be there. Gaia X is a huge European initiative on secure data exchange and storing and this. And is this process also involved as a case in this discussion? Or is it a totally different way on data exchange procedures?
Well, there are always many ideas in the EC about data exchange, but a lot of them only stay with ideas and small pilots. Currently, EUCARIS is appointed to do this data exchange, and of course, we don't know what the future will bring, but we think we will do it via EUCARIS in the next years, and then we will see what will happen after that. And the security of EUCARIS is based on using the ultra-secure tester network between the authorities. And of course, you also have to, the national contact points also have to look at the security for delivering from the manufacturer to the type approval authority, of course. Mm-hmm. But within the EUCARIS network, the security is guaranteed by using this specific network, and also using signatures in the messages that are exchanged, so we always know where things are coming from and that they are not changed during the transport. So, well, and it's being used for many other purposes also. So, I think that this will be okay.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I have to ask the question on blockchain ideas. If I look at these huge chains of information, did you always, at any point in time, think about things like that to make always clear what's where, when, why on technologies like that, or is that totally out of your focus, these technical-based questions?
Well, if you look at blockchain technology or digital twin technology, you could say, well, we all have it in this digital twin or in the blockchain technology, but we think that every IT system can be hacked. Also, blockchain can be hacked, and you can change things. So you also always need another authority to certify things. So I think the vehicle registration authorities and the type approval authorities will have that role for many years. The things on data exchange may change. Yeah, I think we also changed the EUCARIS already many times in the past. So yeah, we keep up with what's happening over there. I think we will not exchange digital twins because there are other organizations doing that. But well, there will be a role for the international data exchange, at least for the next 10 years, let's say it that way.
Yeah, of course, I think there's a huge portion of work to do on this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Itzke, Dexa, and Rolof de Graaf for explanations. Jens Cram for showing us how implementation is doing in the real world. Thank you very much for organizing this event, Andrew. That was really, I think it's a great event with a lot of very important informations. And what I see now here, we didn't lose too much participants. That shows that the content was really of interest for everyone listening. Last but not least, let me say that you will have the possibility to download everything which is possible to make available on our homepage. It's Smart Production. Maybe Andrew can do this as well on the VSF homepage. I don't know, but for sure in the event area of our homepage, Smart Production, you can download everything which we can present to the audience, so that you will be able to look at this. The event, I will mention again, is being recorded. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a link where you maybe can look at one or the other speech again. Yeah, that's all from my side. 2 minutes left. Maybe last sentence from you, Andre?
I'd like to thank you also, Stefan, for allowing us to host it with you guys. Thanks to all the speakers and also Jens and Paulina. Even though I didn't have much time to prepare, it really was a great event. And I also like to thank all the attendees. And yeah, we will communicate latest by Friday where you can find the resources used in this presentation webinar. So yeah, thank you again. Hopefully, Stefan will have good network meetings in the next couple of months, and maybe we'll have something like this again in next year.
For sure. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.